Thank you for watching CMTV. We know that you'll be blessed by this week's message. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Visit cmjacksboro.com for more information about our church and ways that you can get involved. Thank you for joining us and welcome home.
I'm going to kind of take this morning as if I'm looking at a house, and if you know a house, you can see it from four sides. If I put four people around the house, tell them to come back and tell me what it looks like, they'll all have a different description, but it is the same house. And so there's four segments of what I want to do this morning. The first, I just want to start with something that deals with some specific teachings in the Bible. There are three teachings that I think have a similar theme, and I think they're pointed to what we as Christians have to do today. So when you look at the same principles teaching, the first is what Jesus gives us in Matthew 9, where he talks about the old wineskins and new wineskins. If you remember that teaching, he said you can't pour new wine into an old wineskin, because if you do, it'll split the old wineskin, you'll lose the new wine, and you'll lose the wineskin. Now, the concept of wine and wineskins is not something we're real familiar with today. I mean, for us, wine is in bottles. When we see wine is in bottles, it's not in wineskins. And when we think wineskins, we often think like a leather canteen, but that's not it. This is the wineskin that they still use in the Middle East today. It is a huge, big thing. It's kind of like a barrel. We put wine in barrels now. They didn't. They put it in wineskins. And so if you have something that, it's like old leather. When old leather gets brittle, you try to ride a saddle that's got old leather, it's cracked, it'll come apart, you'll fall off, you get hurt. That's the kind of stuff. You can't put new wine in old wineskins. You need something that's flexible, something that's pliable. If you get stiff, and if you get set, and if you get kind of brittle, you lose everything. And I think the thing Jesus is telling us there, very simply, is that we're not to get stiff and we're not to get brittle. The principle, the message can be don't become fixed and flexible. And as humans, we like being comfortable with what we do. We like getting to where we can know it's predictable. We like doing the same thing over. We go to the same restaurants because we like them. We don't do new things, and we get fixed and inflexible. So when God comes up with a teaching that I'm not comfortable doing that. And so we get to this thing where we're kind of inflexible. That's one. The second teaching I'd point you to is in Jeremiah 48, where he talks about wine. And he talks about wine, you start by making wine with the grapes. And the grapes, you go to the press, and you squeeze out all the juice. And then you take that juice, you filter it, you put it in barrels. And from the barrels, you let it ferment, and then it becomes wine. Now, when you look at wine, there's always dregs in the bottom of it. There's always these little sediments and little particles that are there. And it's interesting what Jeremiah 48 says about that. God's talking in Jeremiah 48. He says, you're like wine left on the dregs. You're not poured from one jar to another. You taste bitter, and your aroma is unchanged. See, what they have to do with wine is they have to mix it around and move the barrels and turn the barrels and rotate. If they just let it sit there, those dregs that are there, those sediments, they become bitter, and they make the whole thing bitter. Nobody likes that wine. You want sweet wine, you have to keep it moving. And so I think the message there is don't become settled and stagnant. Don't get like the wine in that barrel that just sits there. Be turned over, be stirred up, be moved around, be mixed up. And again, this is not comfortable for human nature. We all like things that we can depend on, things that we can count on. We have routines we get into. The third teaching is in Job, where Job, after he's gone through all the things that he went through, and he still stayed faithful to God. In Job 38:33, God showed up in Job 38 and said, Job, you think you know so much, let me ask you some questions. And so as he's going through making sure that Job knows Job is only a man and God is God, and there's a big difference between the two, he asked Job a question in Job 38:33. He said, Job, if you know so much, do you know the laws of the heavens? Now that phrase, the laws of the heavens, that's a phrase that historically we've used a whole lot across history, especially American history. When you talk about the laws of the heavens, it really refers to what we have in Romans 1:20, where the Bible says everything you can know about God, He has revealed in creation so that even the heathen are without excuse. I mean, you can know everything about God through what He's created. So when you spend time studying His creation, and by the way, this is why so many of the early scientists were devout Christians, whether it's Isaac Newton or Boyle, or whether it was all these guys, Leibniz or Harvey, I just go through all these names. They studied the works of God, and the more they studied it, the more they understood God, the more they understood His theology, the more they loved God. Science, secular science today, really is an oxymoronic thing. It means you're not really studying what God made. You may be studying the test tubes and the microscope and the things that you've made, but when you study what God's made, it brings you to God. So when you look at, and that's what God's talking about, do you not know the laws of nature? Have you not seen me revealed in creation? And so the laws of nature that God mentioned to Job there, We also call sometimes the laws, or the laws of the heavens, we call the laws of nature or natural law. That's what founding fathers often called it. That's what political philosophers called it in the founding era. So the laws of the heavens, the laws of nature, natural law, they're all the same thing. And there's some certain things you can see about natural laws. And one of the things I was writing, I'm going to take evergreens for a minute. I was riding with Tim Brooks recently in Arkansas, and we were out horseback riding in Arkansas, and we went through some beautiful woods. They have a kind of woods there, very different from anything that we have. Lots of evergreens, really, really green, and you're just surrounded with it. Here we were in the middle of winter time. It was snowing, it was icy, and we're out riding horses. It's just as green as it can be. It looks like spring. Until you look at the ground. And then when you look at the ground, it's all dead underneath. But everything up here looks really green. That's an evergreen tree. And it looks great up here, but it's really dead down here. We have the same thing in Texas. I mean, ours is live oaks. Live oaks stay green all winter long, but if you look at what's under them, it's really dead. Now, what do you get from that? I mean, they're evergreens. Yeah, they're only evergreens because of the fact that they keep shedding off the old. They keep getting rid of the old dead stuff. They don't keep the same leaves all the time. They're always changing those leaves. They stay green because they have a process of change whereby they shed off the old. So all three of these teachings pretty close to the same thing, and they all have the same thing as change. God wants us to change. He doesn't want us to get comfortable with what we're doing. He wants us to try new things when we need to. And I'm going to give you some things this morning that are pretty fundamental to Christian faith, but statistically wise, most Christians don't do anymore, including myself. So I want to share that with you. Now, the change, this concept of change, if you're willing to change, which is what God demands of us, I mean, it's a big thing because we're told in Psalm 55:19, it says, because they don't change, they have no fear of God. In other words, if you have a real relationship with God, you're going to be willing to change. If you don't like change, it's because you don't have a real relationship with God. That's not my opinion. That's what it says. It says, because they have no changes, therefore they fear not God. So if we're not willing to change, we don't have a real good relationship with God, regardless of what we tell ourselves. You judge a tree by its fruits. The fruit is, if you got a relationship with God, you're going to be willing to change. You're going to make changes. You're going to do what you need to advance and grow. I got white hair. You know, I'm an old guy. But I still want to learn new things. I want to do new things. I want to do what the young guys do. I want to learn the technology. It's old. No, I want to be willing to change because I recognize that this is a trait of those that follow God. You've got to be willing to change. Every generation's got new stuff to teach and new stuff to learn. So within that framework, if we're going to change, if you want to change, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable. And that's the bottom line. Because if you get used to something, you get in a routine, you like what you do, you don't like to try something new. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable, and that's a key thing that Christians have to get used to, is I need to try some new things that the Lord is showing, that the Lord is revealing. Second part that I'll take you to is where we are in the nation right now. I look at the nation, and I say that there's some major problems facing America in two areas. These are the two areas I take you to. Everybody gets news to some degree, whether you get it on social media, however you get it across your phone, if you watch cable, if you watch broadcast, whatever it is. We get our news, and the thing that happens as a result is we're obsessed with a national focus. Because I don't care where you get your news, it's all about the stuff that goes on nationally. Nobody turns on Fox or CNN or MSNBC to find what's happening in Jacksboro or Jack County or Young County or Wise County or Parker County or Palo Pinto. We don't get anything. We watch the news. We'll spend hours watching the news or keeping up with our social feeds. We get nothing about what's happening around us. What we get is a national perspective. We're obsessed with that national perspective without even thinking about it. Now, the other thing that goes with that, as a result of being obsessed with national perspective, for example, last week the Senate voted on whether to keep alive a baby after it's born, infanticide. Senate said, no, we don't want to do that. So we don't have protection for babies once they're born, infanticide. And I know a whole bunch of U.S. senators, and I probably know more senators than most people do, but I can't call them and get that vote different. I can't get a good result. I can't call Nancy Pelosi, and I know, Tim and I probably have 120 members of Congress we're close friends with. I can't get the House to vote to fund the border wall. We've got more than 2,500 terrorists every year that are discovered by the Department of Homeland Security trying to cross the border, and that's just the ones we know about. I don't like the fact that we're turning back 2,500 terrorists every year and the borders are open. I mean, think how many come across that. But I can't call Pelosi and get that changed. I can't get stuff changed in Congress. I can't get stuff changed in the Supreme Court when they make a stupid decision. I can't call the president and say, you need to do this. So what happens is we see all this national news and all the things we see are coming out of it. We get paralyzed. I can't do anything about that. There's nothing I live here in Jack County. What can I do? And so what happens is because of the input we really get paralyzed, and we end up doing nothing significant because we just don't think we can make a difference, because what we see is news at a national level. So that's one issue we've got. And that's an issue that I think was dealt with early in American history. If you look at the first 4 battles of the American Revolution, the first, top right corner, that's the Battle of Lexington. You go left, go counterclockwise. You go to the Battle of the North Bridge at Concord, then you go to the road to Boston. Bottom right is Bunker Hill. It's interesting, the first 4 battles of the American Revolution, nobody contacted National Command Headquarters and said, hey, what do you want us to do? We've got the enemy out here. What are we supposed to do? Nobody contacted National Command. They all said, it's our community. We'll take care of it. We really don't care what's going on in the rest of us. We don't care in Massachusetts, what's going on in South Carolina. We got our battles to fight right here. And so when you look at what happened, for example, with the Battle of Lexington, you had 800 British that came to town, a real threat to the town. The Reverend Jonas Clark said, I got 70 guys in my church. We'll go out there and face them down. No problem. And that's what the Battle of Lexington was. It was a local church going out to stand up and fight for the whole community. You had the same thing, the Battle of North Bridge at Concord. You had the Reverend William Emerson, who took 300 guys, and they went out and faced the 800 British. After that, the British didn't like it so much because they were starting to lose their guys, so they turned around and go back to Boston. On the road back to Boston, all sorts of congregations, Reverend Payson Phillips, Reverend Benjamin Walsh, they got their congregations out and said, this is our community. We're not going to do this in our community. And so they stepped out to face the British. And then when you got to the Battle of Bunker Hill, you have Reverend Joseph Lloyd, who forms 2 full regiments out of his church, goes across town to take care of the British. I mean, this was the kind of thing that we did, is we looked at our problems and said, I'm going to fix it locally. Can't do anything about what's happening in other states. I can do something about what's happening in my backyard, and we're not going to put up with this. And so what happens is, the way we won the American Revolution, we studied the history that you had George Washington, you had all these national generals, you had Marquis de Lafayette and Benjamin Lincoln. Yeah, we had those national generals, but we won the American Revolution because we won all the local battles. When you win the local battles, it's how you win the national battle. You don't win the national battle. George Washington stepped in to take care of stuff where there wasn't anybody to do local stuff. What Washington did was go places where we didn't have local stuff to be able to fight. And so the focus has got to be on local stuff, not on national stuff. And so that's how we won the American Revolution. The second thing I would point to with that, in respect to thinking locally, is right now across America, people are praying for revival. As a matter of fact, this May on the National Day of Prayer, there will be 50,000 groups assembled across America praying for revival in America, because we said, man, if we don't have revival in America, we can't survive, the directions we're going, this is all really, we need a revival. So we pray for national revivals, which is good, but national revivals are just like the American Revolution. You see, if you take a national revival like the Great Awakening, First Great Awakening, Second Great Awakening, whatever, take the First Great Awakening. There is no America without the First Great Awakening. First Great Awakening, we look and we studied George Whitefield. George Whitefield, man, what he did was amazing. Over the course of 34 years, he preached 18,000 sermons. Over those 34 years, and by the way, you got people like Ben Franklin, and you got John Adams, you got Thomas Jefferson, all talk about the impact that what Whitefield had. I mean, John Adams has an exchange with Jefferson where there is no America, the United States of America, without what Whitefield did. So we look at what Whitefield did, and 80% of all Americans physically heard him preach a sermon. We look at the Great Awakening as a national revival. It wasn't. He was in nearly every single local community in America. How many local communities do you have to be in to have 80% of all Americans hear you preach a sermon, physically hear you, at a time when there is no mass media, no amplification, no broadcast, anything else? That means he's in every single city in America. See, that's what made the revival, was not that he had these great outdoor meetings, it was that he was in every single city, every town, every county, every state. He rode his horse from Maine to Georgia and back 7 times, preaching every day along the way. Stopped 2 to 3 times a day, he'd pull the pulpit off the back of his horse, he'd get out, he'd preach in that community, go to the next. And see, we have so many local leaders in the Great Awakening we never study. Samuel Cooper of Massachusetts, Gilbert Tennant of Pennsylvania, Samuel Davies, Virginia. We had a national revival because we had local revivals all over the place, which made a national revival. So again, what we have in media today gets us going the wrong direction. We look at national stuff first. So we're obsessed with the national focus. The second problem America has right now deals with the fact that we really do think bigger is better. And we think that in so many areas. We think that, for example, in the area of business, we now have 10 businesses with nearly 500,000 employees in each business. We want big businesses. We look for big businesses. We try to consolidate. We got companies all the time buying each other out to consolidate and make big business. We have the same thing with education. We have 2 universities that have more than 100,000 students. It's real common for a university to have more than 50,000 students. So we look at universities and think big universities, that means they're successful. That means they're good at what they do. And so we think big is better. We do the same thing with government. That's why government keeps growing in all these areas. We don't stop it from growing because we think government should be doing more for us, and we need government to get involved. So we have not stopped the growth of government. And even when it comes to church, right now, if you look nationally where we are, do a lot of polling. George Barton does a lot of polling. We keep up with George. We have to do a lot of polling even for us. And we find that if you ask pastors today in America, how do you measure success? The five top answers given by evangelical pastors, theologically conservative pastors, those that believe the Bible, the 5 top answers on how they measure whether they're successful is the number of attendees, the size of the offerings, the square footage in use, the number of programs, and the number of staff. Notice that is all about numbers. Everything in there we measure by numbers, and the bigger the numbers, the more successful the church is. Now, of course, that was not Jesus' mantra. There's not a one of those things. Jesus didn't care about square footage. He didn't care about how many he had on the staff. He didn't care about how many followed him when he went from meeting to meeting. He didn't measure any of that. But what we're into today is bigger is better. So we look for bigger measurements, and we think that's a good thing. If you look even at something like number of attendees, you take what happens with mega churches now, having a church of 70,000 in a stadium, that's a successful church. We just automatically, how do we know it's successful? Is it producing the right kind of fruit? Is it changing lives? Is it changing community? Right now, some of the biggest mega churches we have, the cities in which they exist, the cities can go into hell in a handbasket. We've got mega churches all over Chicago. In Chicago, we've got more crime, more violence, we're having no impact. It's not how big it is, it's what impact you have. And so we measure things about how big, and man, if we could have a church of 70,000, wouldn't that be, if Jacksboro had a church of 70,000, we'd be a successful church? No, not necessarily. But see, this is the way we measure. We think bigger is better. We do the same thing with revival crusades. We send our money overseas for missionaries, and we want them to have big crusades. And if we send our money overseas for a missionary and they only have 10 people show up at the crusade, we say that's a failure. It's not worth the money. The electricity costs more than that. Let's not give that anymore, because it's not. See, we're into this thing that we want numbers. We think numbers is where everything is. And so Jesus had numbers. We know that one time he fed 5,000 men, performed the miracle of the loaves of fish, fed 5,000 men. Well, you add women and children, you're looking at a crowd of 25,000, 30,000 that was following him just on that one day. And that was common. He had big crowds all the time. But the big crowds never changed the world. What changed the world was he spent time with 12 guys. And those 12 guys went out and changed the world. There's nobody we can point to in the crowds that went out and turned the world around, but we can point to 12 guys that we spent 3.5 years discipling, and they're the ones that made it. So it's not numbers that make a difference. I mean, you can't measure it that way. And when you have crowds, what happens is it shifts responsibility away from me. I don't have to do anything because I'm in a crowd, and that crowd of 70,000 in church, they're going to do something in the community. And so nobody does anything, because what happens is when you have a one-on-one relationship, now the responsibility is on me to do something. When you have a crowd, when you think about a crowd, you think about being part of a group, you look for other people to do something. That's just the human nature, the way it is. So a good example of that is where we are right now in the world. In the world, we have 7.5 billion people in the world, and religions in the world. Christianity is the largest religion in the world. We have 32% of all of the world's adherents. Next is Muslims with 21%, so Christians are by far the biggest religion in the world. Next comes Hindus, and next comes Buddhists. Now, we've been working for a long time to have 32%. I mean, you look at all the professionals we have sent out. We've sent out pastors, and we've sent out missionaries, we've sent out evangelists, and for 2,000 years we've been sending these guys out, and after 2,000 years we're now 32%, which is good. We're more Christians than any other religion, we have more followers as Christians than any other religion in the world. But here's the interesting thing. What if we did the Great Commission? And the Great Commission is, Jesus said, hey, every one of you, all of my disciples, you go disciple others. I'm not telling this to the professionals because I don't have any professionals. You're fishermen, you're tax collectors, you guys go disciple others. So what if we did in the Great Commission? Remember, this is what Jesus said in Matthew 28, 18 through 20. It says, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Who's he talking to here? He's talking to the guys that we now call apostles, but then they were just his followers. They were just average guys, And they screwed up all the time. Just study Peter's life and see how often he screwed up as a follower of Jesus. And so these guys, they're not perfect, they're not professionals, they're not even good at what they do. They're just loyal followers of Jesus. He said, you guys, he said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. He said, go and make disciples of all nations, baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I commanded you. He even sent these guys out 2 by 2 and said, go share the good message. They got back and they came to him and said, by the way, Lord, teach us to pray. He taught them to pray after they went out 2 by 2. So they weren't professionals at what they did. He just sent them out and got them out there. See, that's who he's talking to. He's talking to non-professional people, saying, you guys go share what I've taught you. You share it with others. So that's the Great Commission. That is everyone teaching someone else. So it's not for Eugene to go out and get communities saved. And it's not for missionaries. It's not for evangelists. It is for individuals to go out and do that. And so if everyone were to reach one, let's go back to this thing of 32%. Let's say that every one of us this year decided, I have no commission this year except to find and disciple one person. That's the only thing I'm going to do this year. If every single Christian in 1 year were to do that, we would have 64% of the world being Christian next year. If every Christian just brought one, no big objective. I'm not going to do 10, I'm not going to do 50, I'm going to do 1. If I brought one to the Lord, next year 64% of the world would be Christian. And 2 years from now, the entire world would be Christian. We can do in 2 years what has taken us 2,000 years to get 1/3 of the world. But see, that's because individuals need to step up. It's not groups that he talks to. He's talking to his individual followers. And those are the 12 that did go out and did a great job of getting the known world at that time. Just 12 individuals. And they taught other individuals to go get other individuals. And that's how it spread. So crowds shift the responsibility away from me being an individual. I need to be responsible for doing certain things. That's what Jesus tells me as an individual. So when you see where we are, if you act individually, if you win one, you win the world, and you win locally, you win nationally. See, we think this way down. We should be thinking from the little out this way. We've got everything twisted around. So that's the second thing I want to share with you. The third thing I want to share with you goes to a book that we wrote a couple of months ago. It's called This Precarious Moment. And in it we said there's 6 areas right now where America is facing a breakwater point. We've got our foot out there hanging over a cliff, and we're trying to decide whether we're going to walk off the edge of the cliff. We've got that in 6 areas. And so the 6 areas that we identified and pointed to, that if we don't get it right soon, we're going to have problems that we won't recover from. And that sounds pessimistic, but I'm just telling you from the standpoint of all of history, from 5,500 years recorded history, the nations that have made the decision to take that step over that edge have never recovered from it. So whether it's racism or immigration, whether it's our relationship with Israel, whether it's where millennials are now with their viewpoint, God and government, and the church, there's 6 areas where we've got to make some decisions. I want to take 2 of those and just present those in context of what I've been talking about this morning. If I take the church and millennials, let's start first with the church. What we have with the church is there are 384,000 churches and senior pastors in America. George Barton, a good friend, calls 500 to 600 of these churches every day, and he asks them some of the 6 most basic questions. Ask them about 6 of the most basic teachings of the Bible. These are the 6 questions he asks these pastors and senior churches. Number 1, do you believe absolute moral truth exists? Number 2, is the Bible accurate in its teachings? Number 3, is Satan a real being, or is she an imaginary being on whom we blame bad things that happen? Can heaven be earned? Did Jesus live a sinless life, and does God still rule the world? Now, if you know anything about the Bible, if you've even been to Sunday school, you know that the Bible does have absolute moral truth, like the 10 Commandments. Don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't perjure yourself. You know the Bible's accurate in its teachings. We're told in 2 Timothy 3:16, 17, all Scripture is inspired. It's given by God. We're told in 1 Peter, it does not come from the will of man, it comes from the mouth of God. Is Satan a real being? We know that he's a real being. He even offered Jesus the whole world if Jesus would bow down. Can heaven be earned? We know Ephesians 2:8-9, it cannot be earned. You cannot get to heaven because you're a good person. It takes a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Acts 16:31. Did Jesus live a sinless life? Yes. He is the sinless Lamb, because if he had not been, none of us could be saved. It takes a perfect sinless sacrifice to take away the sins of the world. And does God still rule the world today? If you pray, will God answer? Yes, he will answer prayer. That's why we pray. Those are some of the 6 easiest teachings in Christianity. And yet, the position we find today in the church is that right now, 72% of pastors in churches say they do not agree with those teachings. Now, 72% of what we call the organized church in America today doesn't even agree with the simplest things in the Bible. When you ask Christians individually where they are, only 9% of Christians and only 19% of born-again Christians agree with those 6 beliefs. So Christians as a whole, we're not even close to being anywhere the Bible is. We don't even know what the Bible says. We go to church, say I'm a Christian. Church says we're a Christian church. Sorry, if you judge a tree by its fruits, we've got a real problem in the church today. We're nowhere close to being the church that Jesus told us we should be. So when you look at that, George Barton, because we don't know what the Bible says, because we don't live the Bible, George Barton says that the 70 moral behaviors that they study, and you can think of 70 different moral behaviors, whether that's lying or cheating or physical abuse, whether that's adultery, whether that's pornography. You just think of 70 categories. He said the 70 moral behaviors we study, when we compare Christians and non-Christians, we rarely find substantial differences. We can't find any difference in the way Christians live and non-Christians live. Behavior's the same. That's not supposed to be that way. That's the thing, that we are not living out God's Word. We're not individually being disciples and following. So when you look at churches, when you have such a small percentage as we just looked at, the only way you're going to have a biblical worldview is if you read the Bible. But only 14% of Christians read the Bible on a daily basis. This is why Christians don't think according to what God wants us to do, because we don't even know what He says. So this is where the church is, and it's not a very healthy position. If the church doesn't recover from that, we will be France, we will be Germany, we will be Sweden, we will be all the other nations that become very oppressive and socialistic and very secular, because we don't even know what the Bible says. We don't live out our faith. Just in all those other nations I mentioned, they all have churches there. They even have state-established churches. Germany still has a state-established Lutheran church. There's nothing in Germany that looks like what a Christian should do or think. They just don't live it. So that's where America is. We're on that brink. The other thing I'd point to is where we are with millennials, because you need to understand millennials, they are the entire future of the nation. They're 100% of the future. Millennials will be the next school teachers. They will be the next set of ranchers and farmers. They will be the next set of political leaders. They will be the next set of Hollywood media moguls. They will be the next set of everything. There's not a single thing that goes on in our world today that millennials will not be doing in another 10 to 15 years. The entire nation is in their hands entirely, because they're the next generation of leaders in every single area. So when you look at millennials, and by the way, Gen Zers, millennials are probably 35, 36 and down as far as age. Gen Zers is kind of the next generation demographically. That's going to be maybe 20, 21, 19, 20, 21 and down. So in that range, there are now, with millennials, there are 4 recognizable categories of millennials. These are the categories that kind of, and this doesn't mean these are exclusive categories. A millennial could be in 3 of these categories, or 2 of them, or 4 of them, or whatever. So you could be in all of these categories, but these are the general categories. The first category would be the faith-driven category. These are the folks where faith is important to them. But don't think that means Christian faith, because this is the least biblical generation in America's history. Only 4% of millennials have a biblical worldview. And by the way, where do millennials learn what they believe?
Mom and Dad.
Schools and parents. So if they don't have a good worldview, where did they get that bad worldview? Schools and parents. Everything I'm going to show you came from schools and parents. So if you don't like what millennials believe, look in the mirror, because we either let schools get away with it or we ourselves taught the wrong thing. So only 4%. You know, one of the fastest growing areas of millennial faith-driven folks right now is in the Satanic Church. Nearly 100,000 new additions just in the last 3 years. I mean, it's blowing up. We're having court cases all the time where the church, not the Church of Satan, the new group is called the Satanic Temple, is filing lawsuits against pro-life bills, against religious liberty bills. They're the new aggressive litigators that we face in court, and they're millennials. They're young people who are absolutely committed to there is no absolute moral truth. We don't believe the traditional things about right and wrong or God. So that's one group. Another group is what we call the social justice warriors. These are the guys that will be involved in the front lines. They want to make a difference in the culture. They want to make a difference in the nation. They will get involved in everything that's going on, and they will be out front. It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, if it's for minimum wage or climate change, if it's for we want more federal housing, you name it. You take the issue, Black Lives Matters, Occupy, they will be on the front lines. That's why all these pictures show young people up front. They're very engaged in their nation. They want to make a difference in their nation. They're driven to make a difference, and that's really good that they want to make a difference. Now, what happens with that, they are engaged, and as they say, we will not be silent. But there's a different meaning from what we grew up with. For example, we condemn freedom of speech that hurts other people's feelings. I say a lot of stuff that hurts other people's feelings. Not that I try to, it's just that when I say certain things, people that don't believe what Jesus said, I say, you know, I have a lot of attacks on me now because I actually repeat what 1 Corinthians 6 says, where the Bible says homosexuals will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, that hurts somebody's feelings. I'm sorry, that's what God says. That's not my opinion. I'm just repeating what there's a lot of stuff that will hurt somebody's feelings because that's a subjective standard. But see, not only are they adamant that we're going to speak out, they're adamant that we don't want you to say something that we disagree with. And so what we find right now is they oppose free speech protection at a rate 2 to 3 times higher than any previous generation. They do not like the First Amendment. They do not agree with the First Amendment. They want to protect their freedom of speech, not your freedom of speech. That's why we find that right now 53% of millennials support restrictions on free speech, and 19% of millennials think they have the right to be violent if they disagree with your speech. Now that's a dangerous place to be in a nation where that 1 out of 5 says, I've got the right to be violent against you if I disagree with what you say. That's a whole shift that's going on in what we consider freedom of speech and inalienable rights, etc. So there's a shift going there. The third category I'll point to are those that we would call pro-socialism. This is probably the most covered category media-wise. If you watch national news, we hear a lot about socialism and AOC, who's now in Congress, and Bernie Sanders and others. And it's interesting that when you look at this pro-socialism side, here's what polling says. The Washington Post, millennials are the only age group in America which a majority favors socialism favorably. A Harvard University survey found that 51% do not support capitalism, free market. Millennials have a higher opinion of socialism than of capitalism in the free market. Moreover, Gallup has found that an astounding 69% of millennials say they'd be willing to vote for a socialist candidate for president. Among their parents' generation, only a third would do so. So in one generation, we've gone from a minority wants socialism to a supermajority wants socialism. So it's a massive change economically and government. These are the next generation of leaders. George Barna recently did a poll. Whereas 69% of millennials say that they want socialism, he asked the entire nation, all age groups. And he found that 41% of Americans say we want socialism. Barna, I love his polling because he does not let you get away with just answering the question. He will keep asking you questions to find out if you know what you're talking about. He asked an additional 41 questions and they all dealt with socialism. Do you think the government should have greater control over private property? Do you think the government should be more involved in businesses? Do you think the government should have greater regulations? And these are all things that go with socialism. He asked 41 questions that describe socialism. When he got done, only 2% of Americans supported socialism. See, they like it because they think that it's something that it's not. We've been taught in schools that this is a really fair system. We want fairness and we want sharing, and we think that's really good, but that's not what socialism is. See, and so if we make that step over the line and say we want to be socialist, no nation has ever survived as a socialistic nation. They've all gone to third world nations without exception. So you just can't survive that way. See, what happens is our education day is often based on sound bites, and that's what young people, millennials, have had. Here's a great sound bite: socialism, the radical idea of sharing. Anybody here opposed to sharing? No, so you're all socialists. Wait a minute. That's how simple it is. See, socialism is just sharing. I want to be a socialist because I want to share with others. I want to share. I do share. But I'm not a socialist. But see, this is sound bite thinking. We do not teach students how to think. We teach them how to learn. And so they learn little sound bites like this. Pro-life. And how could you let people die without health insurance? So what you get today is, if you're really pro-life, what that means is you're for a single-payer universal health care system. That's socialistic health care. If you're really pro-life, then you're going to support a single-payer health care system. Same thing here. Capitalism, where you can enslave fellow humans and rape the planet and be praised for your good business sense. Well, I don't want to rape the planet. I don't want to enslave humans, so I'm against capitalism, because that's what capitalism is. Really? Can you show me an example of where that's happened? So we don't go into that. We have these sound bites, and this is how we're educating right now. Our lives are worth more than their profits. Big protest that's going on here that's led to the group called People Before Profits. Can you show me any business in America that puts profits before people, like maybe Walmart? No. The reason Walmart makes so much money is they put people before profits. They're going to make sure you get what you want, and they're going to bring it to your car, and you can text them, or you can phone them, or they'll go pick it off the shelf. They do everything they can to make people happy, and then they get money as a result. That's the way the free market system works. The more you serve people, the more people reward you. There's nothing out there where businesses say we put profit above people. Nobody'd be in business if they did that. But see, nobody thinks through that. So we get this thing of socialism is really good. Right now, the biggest socialist raised in America, hands down, is Bernie Sanders. He's the only open socialist we have running for president. We've got a lot of other socialists running for president. They're just not as open. Right now, 75% of college students support Bernie Sanders for president. Hands down. If we make that step over socialism, America will not survive as we've known it. So that's the third category. The fourth and final category is the category of what we call moral libertarians. Moral libertarians, they say 4 and 5 believe there's no absolute moral truth. Now the Bible is very clear about moral standards. And the Bible also tells us in Deuteronomy 6:24, Joshua 1:8, God says, everything I tell you to do is for your benefit. I'm not telling you to do this just because I want to see you jump when I say jump. What I'm telling you to do, I'm telling you, don't put your hand on that hot stove because you will come off blistered and burned and scarred. Don't do it. And so everything he tells us to do, including morally, including sexually, he does for our own good. He has made it really clear that sex outside of a lifetime relationship between a man and a woman in marriage is wrong. It doesn't matter whether it's homosexual sex, it doesn't matter whether it's sex before marriage, it doesn't matter whether it's cohabitation, it doesn't matter whether it's sex outside of marriage, adultery, anything outside the context of a man and a woman in a lifelong union is wrong. God's made that real clear. Now, I can show you dozens of studies to show you where that everything he said, statistically, secularly, has proven to be right. But, I mean, that's just what he said, guys, I love you. What I'm telling you to do is for your own good. So, when you look at where millennials are now, they don't get that. Right now, casual sex is a normal part of dating and millennial relationships, which, if you believe the Bible, this is not going to lead to good results. I'll show you stats in a minute. NPR, National Public Radio, says cohabitation before marriage is now almost a rite of passage for the millennial generation. The thing is, we need to test drive the car before we buy it. So let's live together for a while because we don't want divorce. Let's live together, and if we like the relationship, then we'll get married. That's the logic. You know what? Study after study after study, secular studies, including just a couple weeks ago, showed that the more you cohabit, the more likely you are to get divorced in later life. That's exactly the opposite. They don't want to get divorced, so let's cohabit. No, it goes it's counterintuitive to what we think. And so cohabitation, a rite of passage, it's not good for the future, and they're finding it now. Older millennials are already finding that. Only 25% believe it's morally wrong for a couple to live together with no intention of getting married. Traditional male-female marriage is not highly esteemed. 59% of millennials have never married. That's the highest percentage of any generation. They do not like marriage, don't care about marriage, they are not married. STD rates are soaring, including HIV. See now, because we don't keep sex within the boundaries. As said, 40 years ago we had 6 sexually transmitted diseases. Today we have 26 sexually transmitted diseases. 4 of them are incurable. There are no solutions known for them. So STDs are soaring because we're not doing what God told us to do for our own good, and we don't teach that anymore because the church doesn't believe the Bible anymore, and Christians aren't sharing their faith with others, sharing what they believe. So continue. 57% of children born to millennials are born outside of marriage, the highest percentage of any generational record. If you have children born outside of home with a mother and father, they're 3 times more likely to have depression and psychological problems, 3 times more likely to have lower grades, 4 times more likely to be involved in gangs. They're 5 times more likely that they will be in jail as juvenile. I mean, the stats are unbelievable. When you have children born outside of mother and a father, the societal stats are through the roof. The biggest problem we have with crime right now is that most of those children are born outside the home of a mother and a father. But that's what God wants us to do. So millennials, 57% seek out pornography, 2/3 see gender as fluid rather than fixed, and half see gender as a spectrum of various identities. None of this male-female. God's made them male and female. Bible 4 times says male and female. All of nature teaches male and female. No, right now there are 92 legally recognized gender identities in the United States. 92 legally recognized genders. If you look on Facebook, your Facebook profile gives you a choice of 74 genders you can choose on your Facebook profile. Nobody really looks at their profile, but what is this? Well, this is the future. You see, this is where we are. And so when you look at this, all of these things right here, when you look at where millennials are on government, on economics, and on morality, no nation has ever survived the beliefs that they hold right now. None. Every nation's gone down. So that becomes crucial. And by the way, we got a report 2 weeks ago, Gen Zers even more radical in their beliefs than millennials are. And again, I don't look at millennials and blame them for anything because they got it from schools and they got it from parents. Millennials do nothing but reflect what they have been taught. And so that comes back to us. Now, here's the 4th part I want to get into, and that's the solutions. What do you do to fix all this stuff? Because I've laid some stuff out here, and it's been kind of dark and morbid and scary, and we don't like thinking of America not being around anymore, or us having some kind of a civil war because of the different conflicting beliefs. Now, we have more polarization in America right now than we've had at any time since 1856, and that's what led to the Civil War. And so this is kind of a scary time, all the polarization, whether they're willing to be violent against the other side. I mean, it's not a good, but I don't mean to scare you with any of that, because there are definite, absolute solutions. And I want to take you through that, and that's the fourth thing we'll do this morning. Truth is the basis of everything. Your goal with anything you do is to communicate truth. There is absolute truth. You have to get people believing in absolute truth. Now, that means you first have to believe in absolute truth. But if you do, if you believe that, and as a Christian who reads the Bible, you believe that there's absolute truth. You got to communicate that. Now, how do you do that? There's three ways to do it. First way you do it is through relationships. Interesting thing about millennials. Polling shows us right now that you cannot reach millennials as a group. You can only reach them one-on-one. They're the most disciplable generation in polling history. We've never had a group so open to someone else talking to them and sharing their thoughts. You can't sit in a group and have an arena and talk to them and change. You got to have a relationship with them. You know what? Having a relationship means spending time. It doesn't mean I need to sit you down and lecture you and show you why socialism is so bad. No, it means I need to go out for a Coke, go out for food, go out and sit down and let's just talk with each other. Let's get to where we like each other and that we know. And then as that happens, I can make some progress. But discipling is not going out and converting people. It's making friendships, relationships. When Jesus was with a woman at the well, asked her all about herself and her family and her beliefs and where she's from, had a conversation. Relationships. Millennials respond to relationships. Now, if you're in an older generation, we respond to groups. We like to hide in groups. If we're going to get America healthy, you're going to have to make a decision that, you know what, I'm going to start reaching out to younger generations. Other thing interesting, millennials are the only generation in polling that doesn't care how old you are. They just want a genuine relationship. They don't care how white my hair is and how young they are. If there's a genuine relationship where you're a real person, they'll listen to you. So they're the most disciplable generation we've ever had. They're the only generation we've had that doesn't care about age. They just want genuine relationships, which means every single Christian can have a dramatic impact. And just as every Christian needs to find one person next year that we're going to really work on to get to come to know God, every Christian needs to make a disciple of someone else. Every Christian needs to go and make disciples, teaching them everything I've taught you. Teach millennials what Jesus said about economic issues, because Jesus is a big free market guy when you study his parables. I mean, I'll just take you through the Bible and show you that. So you need to create a relationship. That's the first thing you do. The second thing you do is you use metrics. Metrics are simple measurements. Let me give you an example. Marriage. Right now, millennials are not big on marriage. A common phrase you'll hear is getting married and settling down isn't the most important thing in my life. That's a real common phrase. Okay. Once I've created a relationship, and once they know me and trust me, and once I have fun with them, and we've gone out to eat, and we've gone out and shot guns together, whatever we're going to do together, I can show them this study. Have you ever seen it? This is an interesting thing I found in the newspaper yesterday. What do you think about this? Just show them. Because what you see, and it's hard for you to see at the back, but what you see is married people right there have an income that is hugely superior to a single father, single mother, and that's even if there's just one parent working in the home. If they're a married couple and just one parent's working, they make more as a married couple with one parent working than either one of them individually gets from working. Isn't that interesting? You get more economic benefit from being married than from not being married. And by the way, see over here, this is poverty rates on the right side. For married people, the poverty rate is only 8.3%. For single fathers or single mothers, it is 38.5%. Remember, 59% of all millennials are now born outside of marriage, which means you're going to have a lot of poverty because there's not marriage. Now, this is not Bible stuff. This reflects what the Bible teaches. But I can just ask them, have you seen this study before? Really interesting study. And what happens is what we have now, this is headlines not from this study, from many studies. Study confirms millennials are the poorest generation today. In history, millennials are the poorest. Why would that be? Because they have the worst views of marriage, the worst views of sexual relationships. So they don't have any of the stuff that we used to take as culturally part of who we are as people. It's interesting. I can use metrics. I can also use metrics because, you see, there's the belief that there's alternative lifestyles. There's 92 different genders, and that's just what you choose, and you can do what you choose, and as long as I do it, I'll just leave you alone. Interesting thing, when you look at genders like homosexual, that is a lifestyle that is an alternative, and that's what you choose, that's fine, that's their viewpoint. It's interesting that if I go to the American Red Cross page for giving blood, American Red Cross is a fairly liberal organization socially, and yet even on their webpage, they quote from the Centers for Disease Control and from the Food and Drug Administration on if a homosexual wants to give blood, we'll let a homosexual give blood, but you can't be a practicing homosexual. If you've had homosexual sex in the past 12 months, you cannot give it. That's discriminatory. Why doesn't everyone get the same right? See, are we saying that the Red Cross and that the federal government is discriminatory against homosexuals? No, not at all. See, there's a medical reason for that. For example, homosexuals, they have an HIV prevalence 60 times higher than the general population, 800 times higher than first-time blood donors, and 8,000 times higher than repeat blood donors. We don't want you giving blood because your body has reacted in a way that says what you're doing is really dangerous for everybody else. See, if you give blood, you can infect a whole lot of people. Well, I'm charitable. I want to help other people. I'm going to give blood. I'm sorry, we can't take your blood because your lifestyle has resulted in physical changes. Here's another one. Homosexuals have hepatitis C infections 2 times higher than the general population, have hepatitis B infections 5 to 6 times higher than the general population. They comprise less than 2% of the population and account for 63% of all syphilis cases. Maybe that lifestyle is not as healthy as everybody thinks. But again, we don't give consequences anymore. We don't teach this to young. So this is where you can use metrics, and I don't have to teach. I say, man, I saw this really interesting study this week. What do you think about this? Have you ever seen that before? Man, I had no idea. I wonder why that is. Why would syphilis be so much higher, and why would HIV be 8,000 times higher for people? See, I can just go through stats. And so that's where metrics work. The third thing I'll point you to, third and final thing, is very simply the use of questions. I was listening to the Bible on my iPhone yesterday, and I was listening, and the disciples kept asking Jesus questions, and he never answered the questions. He started asking them questions. And I thought, that's interesting. They asked him questions, he asked them questions. Why would that be? Because asking questions makes you think. Jesus, interestingly enough, asked a lot of questions. There's over 300 questions in the Gospels that Jesus asked. Now, he didn't answer a whole lot of questions, but he sure asked a lot. And asking questions is what makes you think about things. For example, if I take socialism, which, again, 75% of college students like socialism, 69% of millennials like socialism, I say, socialism, that's an interesting thing. I'm glad you like sharing. I'm glad you're really into that thing of wanting to help other people. And socialism seems good. We've had 5,500 years of recorded history. There's been thousands of nations in the history of the earth. Can you show me any one nation in 5,500 years that was socialistic where that it increased prosperity and preserved individual freedom? And they can't. They cannot show me a single case where the socialism produces what they think it's going to produce. So I can just ask that question and I don't have to give an answer. Asking that question brings them, that's what Jesus did to disciples all the time, brought them truth by asking them questions. So those are the 3 things I'd point to. The goal is every one of us needs to touch someone else. We need to find a millennial, and if you are a millennial, find a millennial to mentor and get the right direction. If you're a senior, if you're a boomer or a buster, find a millennial, disciple, just create a friendship. You're not trying to convert them, you're trying to create a friendship, and then you give them information. And you also need to do the same thing now with the millennials, but with the unsaved. I'll close with these stats. Right now, 50% of Christians today have never heard of the Great Commission. So 50% of Christians don't even know that Jesus told them to go disciple other people. On top of that, in 2006, 45% of Americans were born-again Christians. We know from John 3:3, Jesus says, unless you're born again, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. So born-again Christian simply means someone who has had a life-changing experience in Jesus Christ. You don't get to heaven without that. That's Jesus in John 3:3. In 2006, 45% of American Christians were born again. Last year, it was down to 31%. Now, in 12 years, that's a 14% drop in those who have been born again. Guess what it's going to be 25 years from now? It's 0, the way those stats are going. I mean, we won't even have the possibility of a Christian nation. If we keep relying on professionals to do our Christian work, not Christians individually to do it, we'll go down the tubes. This is where we individually have to say, you know what, I'm going to take care of Jacksboro and Jack County. I'm going to take care of folks at the school that I know of. I'm going to take care of folks in the community. I'm going to make sure they individually know Jesus. I'm going to make sure that they know the right thinking about government and about social issues and about morality. That's the stuff we can do. So 62% of Christians do not talk about their faith to anyone else. This is the Bible verse I think is significant. Jesus says, everyone who acknowledges me before men, I'll acknowledge before my Father. If you don't acknowledge me before men, I won't acknowledge you before my Father. See, he puts it on us to go talk to people. So that's a challenge I'll give you, is that we need to be someone that reaches out and touches others, not only with those who are not Christian, but with those who think wrong in so many areas. We need to disciple them. So if we can do that, don't care what the rest of the nation does, if we win all the local battles, start winning these battles locally, we will win the nation, we will win the state. But don't focus on that. Focus on what's around you. God bless you guys. Thanks for letting me share.
Everyone has access to living an abundant life. That access begins when you give with a joyful heart. As Pastor Eugene always says, we is the church. When you give to Christian missions, you are sowing into people's lives and advancing into the kingdom. Try giving online today by visiting cmjacksboro.com/give.